Okay, tonight is our end of Vassa Dhamma talk evening, and so we get to hear Dhamma talks from Anagarikas, Samaneras, bhikkhus up to just below 10 Vassas. The way we'll do this is I'll be choosing names, and whoever is chosen can come up to the Dhamma seat and use the lapel mic up here, and start with Namo Tassa 3 times, and then give your Dhamma talk and see whatever is coming up for you. So, without further ado, we'll start with Anagarika Scott.
Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. I get to go first. That's my style. I like that. I would just get more anxious the longer it went on. I think I'd like to start by expressing gratitude to the community and to the entire Sangha, being supported, just to practice goodness. I mean, you wake up with it raining outside, sheltered in a kuti, and it's warm, and like, oh, I'm here to practice goodness. This shelter is for me to practice goodness. It's and the food and just all the generosity you see here on a daily basis. As far as expressing gratitude to our teachers, our spiritual guides, and of great virtue, and part of the blessing of being human, I mean, we can learn from each other. This continuity back all the way to the Buddha's time in this tradition. We're able to open the suttas and learn this training with right effort. Right effort's quite important. Been contemplating it a lot. I imagine it pervades the whole path. We use right effort when we or this just right, the tuning, practicing. I'm reminded when I was younger, I was river rafting with my family, and we were in inner tubes actually. You got your inner tube and it's tied. My inner tube's tied with like a piece of twine to my mom's inner tube that's tied to another inner tube. I think my father's maybe, and the rest of my family, my older brother, my sister. And you get dropped off by a bus and you float down the river and get picked up. And I was quite young, but you're in this stream and it's taking you along, and it's you're just going with the flow. You're floating, and come up on a water hazard. There's rapids, and get pulled through the inner tube, and I'm in this hydraulic underwater, just going in circles. Became apparent, like, oh, okay, this thing's not going to spit me out. I'm just going to be going in circles under here, and kind of orientate myself the right direction, and plant my feet on the bottom of the river and kick off as hard as I could. And I pop out of the hydraulic and everybody's looking, oh, wow, you made it out. Everybody's face is all white, and my uncle's there, he's ready to save me. Latch onto my uncle's inner tube, but I was pretty young. I was pretending like I was an alligator on the shore soon after that, but it's this, we're in this stream where we have our karma and the worldly winds and all these things, and the teachings are there, but we have to orientate ourselves the right way, and we got to push off the bottom also. And we use right effort in all these different aspects of the path. Making an effort to use right intention, making an effort to have right speech, making an effort to put down any unwholesome and cultivate the wholesome is it's quite a deep part of the path, I imagine, just having this right effort with right view. And it's been really great to practice for the little over a year I've been here. It's not long, and in the time of COVID like this, it's just been a huge blessing. Not looking at the news or politics or even dealing with any of that stuff going on out there. Just kind of in the forest, and the trees are still green, and the birds are still chirping, and all this a nice community here. But not a whole lot to say, but. A lot of gratitude.
Upassika Dave.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. I appreciate Anagarika Scott's start. So I'd like to start the same way by honoring those worthy of honor, which in the first stanza of the Mangala Sutta, the Buddha says is among the highest blessings. In one of the Jataka tales, we learn that the Buddha in a previous life is a golden peacock who lives for 800 years avoiding the arrows and the snares of hunters by doing a chant each morning and each evening, which I'll paraphrase. He comes out of his Himalayan cave, looks at the sun, pays homage to the sun, pays homage to those Brahmins and seekers of truth, pays homage to the awakened ones and to awakening. He pays homage to those released and to release. And then he goes and searches for food, and in the evening he makes the same chant and arranges his nest. And not only does he experience longevity in that life, but he goes on to become a Buddha. So, honoring those worthy of honor. Homage to Ajahn Mun, homage to Ajahn Chah, homage to Lungpor Pasano, all the senior monks, junior monks, novices, and Anagarikas seated here who are using this life to try to attain release. I think I'd like to talk a little about my experience of Dhamma for the last year and a half here at Abhayagiri. In our chant book, we often do a chant about the 5 subjects for frequent recollection. I'm of the nature to age. I have not gone beyond aging. I have the nature to sicken. I have not gone beyond sickness. I'm of the nature to die. I have not gone beyond dying. All that is mine, beloved, and pleasing will become otherwise, will become separated from me. I'm the owner of my karma, heir to my karma, born of my karma, related to my karma, abide supported by my karma. All that I do for good or for ill. I'm not getting that exactly right. I'm the heir to my karma, essentially, is the end there. I think to the mind, these sound like depressing subjects. Why would you want to consider those? And I think my brief monastic career that concluded today could be defined by aging, sickness, and death. I had the good fortune to find Dhamma late in life. I took a meditation course just shy of 5 years ago and was so struck by the truth that within a few months I'd gotten rid of my apartment, sold all my stuff, and started volunteering at meditation centers. And so when I found the Ajahn Chah tradition and this monastery, it seemed like a natural continuation of this path to try to ordain and become a monk. Ordaining as an Anagarika at 45, a little like being a 45-year-old intern. Your companions in the Anagarika life are could be my children. So it's a little strange. But more than that, just the last year and a half have been characterized by physical difficulties, among them a persistent headache that manifests like a drill boring into the top of my skull when I try to meditate. That began on a meditation course shortly after I started taking meditation courses and has persisted. Last November I tore the meniscus in my knee, and our general practitioner said, let's not do anything about it and let's just see what happens. So we didn't, and still have a torn meniscus. And I think it was 2 or 3 months later, I lost the sight in my right eye, and it seemed almost comical relaying this to Ajahn Nyaniko because of how things were going, and basically what I could see like it's like if you shook up a snow globe. That's what my sight looked like out of my right eye. And it turned out that I had detached my retina and had to go for surgery, and following surgery I had to lie on my right side for 2 straight weeks. So quite a bit of aging and sickness related ailments in a short period of time. you can't ordain with a chronic ailment. And so that specter is sort of lingering over me throughout this period. And went a year, and it seemed like probably wasn't a candidate to continue. I asked Ajahn Nyaniko for permission to try. He gave me till the end of this Vassa to see how things went. And I guess we don't think aging and sickness and death are going to come to us. And society doesn't encourage us to think about these things. And you might ask yourself, what would the benefit be? And I guess the value is these things come to all of us. There's a great sutta in Guttara Nikaya, Book of the Threes. The Buddha tells of this sort of ne'er-do-well man coming to his death and meeting Yama, the Lord of Death. Yama saying, "My good man, you seem to have misbehaved. Didn't you see the first messenger?" Man says, "No, I didn't see him." Yama says, "You didn't see aging? You never saw an aging person? You never saw an older person stooped over, ailing?" "Oh yeah, okay, yeah, I did see that. I guess I was negligent and I didn't make merit." Likewise, Yama says, "You never saw a sick person? You never saw a dead person?" And the man says, no, I didn't, or I was negligent. And so that man must pay the consequences of his negligence, which in this case are some sort of level of hell. By contrast, when you get an opportunity to live at a monastery, there's just enough work that there's some difficulty, but there's time for reflection. When you have time to sit and do nothing, but reflect on your circumstances, there comes this awareness. Existence is just vibration. There's high vibrations, high frequencies which correspond to pleasant sensations, and there's low, thudding, painful vibrations which correspond to pain. And the Buddha tells us that is that's the sensual realm. Seeing this spectrum, there is the opportunity to sort of gain an awareness that there's nothing really here for you. There's nothing to be gained from chasing pleasant sensations, running from painful sensations, other than to use them for contemplation, for consideration that they'll end in death. Recently, I went home because my mom had a stroke, and my mom is 78, but has always been a very active person. And what I noticed is that she seemed very frustrated, angry, irritated that she was trapped in this body that was failing her. My mom is not a Buddhist, doesn't meditate. She is a a praying person, but what struck me about the sort of depression that came over her as a result of losing her faculties is that this is the time to meditate. When all of your faculties have failed you, there's nothing to do but watch your thoughts and make sure that they're wholesome. And I feel like that's essentially what we're doing here at the monastery, is practicing for death. So when Yama rips the body away from us, we will have developed dispassion for the pleasant sensations, for ownership, and for just association with the body as me, as myself. I wasn't expecting to feel this way, but I think there's this sort of, what I'm feeling right now is also a type of death. I feel like I've been going through the stages of grief, thinking, I won't be here when they build the Upassika hall. I won't be here when they burn all the burn piles we spent months assembling. I won't be here when the next Kruba Ajahn arrives. And sort of imagining, this is what death is going to be like. You're going to be thinking, what will my children be like? What will become of my children? What will become of my family? What will become of my possessions? And just, it's an amazing opportunity that all of us have to have found the Dhamma, to be able to consider and contemplate these things thoroughly, and to prepare ourselves to develop merit, develop wholesome mind states. And I just learned that Ajahn Sumedho said now in his 80s, his mind is the brightest it's ever been. May we all die with bright minds like that. May we all develop in Dhamma.
Yasa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So first off, just want to express my gratitude and appreciation to the Ajahns and the rest of the community, the bhikkhus, the one and only Samanera, and Anagarikas, and lay community. So as Ajahn Nyaniko was saying during the Patimokkha, it's the end of Vassa, and it's been a very harmonious Vassa period. The community, being on good terms, treating each other well, working together, doing these various projects, tankemas, sewing projects, people helping out with that. Jino and others helping to sew a new robe for Suhajjo. A couple monks are going on Tudong tomorrow, and various other monks have been helping out with them getting them up to date and prepared with so they can have as safe and I was going to say as safe and happy as a time as they can, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be raining a lot, so not sure how happy it will be, but at least safe, hopefully. So yeah, it feels good to be part of such a kind and supportive community. So I thought I would share at least like a part of kind of a small section of a sutta that I appreciate, that inspires me. And it's part of the Kassapa Samyutta, the Samyutta Nikaya. And the context is Mahakassapa kind of recounting his first meeting with the Buddha and paying respects to him and saying to the Buddha that the Buddha's his teacher. And the Buddha's praising, right off the bat, Mahakassapa for being so sincere. And then he gives him this triple exhortation, which actually counts as Mahakassapa's ordination, his going forth and higher ordination. And so the first one of the three, and I'm going to paraphrase here, so is Kassapa, you should train yourself thus. I will arouse a keen sense of shame and fear of wrongdoing towards my elders, junior monks, and the middle status monks. And then the next one is Kassapa, you should train yourself thus. I will listen to any Dhamma connected with the wholesome, with eager ears, wholeheartedly, fully attentive. And then the last one is Kassapa, you should train yourself thus. I will never relinquish mindfulness directed to the body associated with joy. And that last one, for me, is very inspiring. I actually have that part on my shrine, kind of front and center. Kind of going to what Anagarika Ravi was just saying about not letting go of things too quickly, because the Buddha, telling Mahakassapa to never relinquish the practice and connect it with joy. So there's obviously encouragement to hold on, really, at least to the wholesome. Also, the emphasis on joy I find very helpful because it's so easy to get bogged down. So easy to get off track through external situations, conversations with people, work, all kinds of different conflicts, and then internal stuff, the emotional disturbances, unskillful thinking patterns. So, joy, right? I'm thinking of Ajahn sake right now. He's kind of, at least for me, kind of a embodiment of joy. And he's very confident, too. So I think there's this connection or relationship between joy and confidence, being connected to the wholesome, and being confident because Like I know for myself when I'm lost in some kind of confusing state of mind or irritated through some anxiety, these types of ways of thinking. It feels kind of depressing. And I don't feel too, confident, or it's more difficult to look someone in the face when I'm immersed in anxiety or doubt. But I feel fine looking someone in the face when I'm not doing that. And especially when there's joy. So then, how do we bring about joy? And different people have already touched on that. Anagarika Ravi, Tankema. Finding different ways to bring joy to the mind through good acts, generosity, working together, sila, being established in that virtue. And then also through the meditation practice. And I know Ajahn Nyaniko has said this before. Ajahn Sona's big on this as well. This interest being kind of also connected to joy. So when getting interested in something, whatever it is, whatever kind of meditation practice or activity that you're actually interested in, it's easy for joy, or joy is more prone to arise, say. I think they probably bounce off each other, play into each other. When you're in a happy state of mind, joyful, then you're more interested in things. And then they feed back into each other. You get more interested, more joy, more interest. And I really appreciate Ajahn Sona's, he said, how do you find interest in life? What's the best way to find interest in life? He was asking some people this question. And he had an answer for it. He was looking for a specific answer. So how to find interest in life is interest. And I thought that was very inspiring and empowering, because it's like we can choose to find ways to give rise to that. It's not just at random. So this is the end of my first Vassa, and I feel happy to be here. And I appreciate all the support from everyone, and my brothers in the holy life, and the extended family, the lay community, who's also has inspiring practice, as well as supporting the monastery immensely. So I'll leave that as a reflection.
Next is Venerable Suddhiko.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. 7 years ago, I came here, started the Anagarika training and the novice training, and then my fifth Vassa as a bhikkhu. And that may seem like a long time, but it feels like a drop in the bucket. Feels like no long time at all. Especially, I think, at least for myself, and taking on this training and doing away with becoming, that sort of becoming energy. over the years, it seems much more expansive and broad and open and wide, light. Meanwhile, my friends my same peer group are getting married and having kids and moving along with their careers. It all feels very temporal. There's certain steps you do, first, second, and third, and move forward. And in some sense, we have that here, but very much the training taking effect is, you just do the core watch your mind, do what the work monk asks you to do, help out, go back to your kuti, meditate, do it again. There's no sort of time crunch or retirement or things you think about in that sort of way, which is very liberating. With that, I've been reflecting on just kind of this time period, and Lumpur Pasano saying, it took him 5 years just to understand what it meant to be a monk. How to take care of your robes, how to look after the monastery, upatak, look after the senior monks, look after, do these things that monks do. Yeah, it's very accurate. But it feels very good. And it's nice to have this perspective, because you may come here for like a winter retreat, spend 3 months or a year as an Anagarika or something, and it seems you get these real peaks and valleys, the highs and lows. And you think, my mind is such a mess. And it is. It is a mess. But you clean it up a little bit at a time. And, after 7 years, it's kind of, you can look at it and be like, okay, it's not that bad anymore. It's still messy, but still got some work to do, or a lot of work to do. But, you kind of get some perspective on it, instead of just these, And with that, I think, in coming here and taking on the training and deciding to become a monk and live this life, I think of the real inspirations, as a Westerner, not really knowing what a monk is, or exactly being able to pin it down. There's so many different traditions and different styles. But really meeting like Lumpur Pasano and Ajahn Nyaniko, and seeing somebody that I'd never seen anywhere else in the world, somebody that had, just a resounding peace and wisdom and clarity about life, was really inspiring, and you think, man, if I should do what they've been doing, and maybe in 40 years, I can be like that. Because of the pandemic, I got a second Vassa in Thailand, and I got to spend that time upataking Lumpur Liam with 3 other monks. And I think this year is his 80th birthday. And he's supposed to have completed his work maybe in his 9th Vassa. So that's many years as an arahant, and to spend time around, and somebody's, just to witness somebody's just impeccable behavior and habits, and somebody who's just so calm and normal and equanimous about everything in life, is a real blessing, a real opportunity, and very inspiring. And I've been thinking about something he said while I was there, which was when we have hiriotapa, we have mindfulness. And, just kind of a simple reflection of what am I doing, and this reflection on ethics and how to be a good person in the world and not cause harm. And it's, in some sense it's simple, in other sense it's, quite complex and profound. It's awesome, oftentimes seem to go together. But yeah, I think that's maybe one of the key lessons I got from my time so far is that, oftentimes the more complex and strange and complicated it is, the more dukkha involved, and just simple, normal, straightforward, relaxed is less dukkha. And it doesn't need to be more complicated than that.
Anagarika Cole.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. When some people asked how I'd prepare for this, what came to mind to say was that I'd think about it some, but probably I'd just focus on the area in the middle of my chest and turn my mouth on. That's what I decided to do. Yeah. I'm pretty new here. I just ordained, I think, about a month ago. And there's a constant feeling of just not quite right. And that, what today was going on was my mind was saying, I just don't understand. I don't understand. And I don't even understand what I don't understand. It wouldn't even give me what are you confused about? There's so much simple, just things that we could be doing rather than just sitting here not understanding something. But then the tricky thing is once I get into that state, then I try to figure something out, and I spend long amounts of time just trying to figure things out just to get rid of this feeling of don't understand, or trying to chase some feeling of kind of, now I understand. Yeah, that's it. Come out of meditation and have some idea about something, and oh yeah, now I understand. But I really don't. I was wondering today to myself, what would it be like to understand? What kind of understanding? Is really the goal of this to be someone who understands? Maybe. But right now I need to work on keeping my clothes clean. So I'll do that. I'll start with that. Yeah, I'll do it there. Thank you for listening.
Next is Tan Suhajjo.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. What Anagarika Cole just shared kind of reminds me of some recurring themes of reflection of my own. There's just these two words which are they're not etymologically related, but they're the meaning, I was thinking about like in the suttas, it's two very important words. One of them is avidya, often translated as ignorance, and it's usually kind of pointed to as the root of this thing called dependent co-arising or paticca samuppada. And the other one is it's one of the three kind of unwholesome roots, moha, delusion. Thinking about like what do these things feel like? Because that's one of these things that is kind of this question because you're reading the suttas and there's all kinds of key words, sankhara this and sukha vedana that and these different things, but it's like, okay, yeah, but what does it actually feel like? What is that? What in my experience corresponds to this word? So in some sense, these are actually very difficult words, the avidya and the moha, to identify. They're super important because they seem to be over and over again sort of at the heart of all the problems that we face, or at least the solvable problems, right? Sort of, so we might say the second arrow dukkha, the pain that's optional, or the suffering that's optional. So the sense of like not understanding what we don't understand. Because it's a funny thing, the way this problem that we have, this mind, there's not very many things like it in terms of, it's like a catch-22, where the only thing that we can use to sort of observe and problem solve with the mind is the mind itself. So when we sit down to meditate, that's kind of the task, is to sort of work on this thing, right? Clean it up, tidy it up, or cultivate the wholesome, abandon the unwholesome. But what is the unwholesome? What is the wholesome? What are the good habits? What are the bad habits? Is this good happiness or bad happiness? And we answer those questions through the mind itself. So it's kind of it's a confusing prospect to sort of figure it out when, it's sort of like, I don't know, you're trying to pick something out of your eye, but you're looking in the mirror and the thing that's in your eye, that it's like it's preventing you from seeing what's going on. And you so you have to find kind of creative ways of identifying delusion, or identifying these essentially like blind spots. Like that's so one of the ways that I've thought about like these things, and it's sort of like, okay, what are the symptoms of delusion? What are the symptoms of ignorance, of avidya? And I don't have any real answers or any real, I don't know, I haven't solved the problem yet, so to speak, but some things that I've found that feel to me very much like symptoms of delusion and ignorance. So usually there's often there's a fixation. We get hung up on something, like a perception, particularly of another person or of a situation. When we get, or on a certain, say, meditation technique or a certain practice or a certain method, when we get fixated on it. And where even when it's not working, or when it's only working in some situations, or whether or not this perception we have is useful or not, we keep going back to it, we keep kind of holding on to it, making use of it, whether or not it really serves for a long-term benefit. So yeah, when I find myself becoming fixated on something, that's a point where it's like, aha, there's avidya here working. This is, you can basically assume that it's everywhere all the time, or near enough, but it's like to get a handle on it and to sort of kind of get under the hood and see how it works. What's it really doing, and how is it making my life more complicated and more suffering? And so, yeah, this is sort of, you can start to get a handle on it with these symptoms. So, fixation. I think some others. That's a good one. It just like distortions are kind of another one, I guess. Like not perceiving things clearly, which again is like it's hard to see. I use a lot of imagery and stuff. So this is another, when the Buddha uses different similes for the practice, and particularly for wisdom. Sight, the metaphor of sight comes up very, very often. The light of wisdom, light arising. We find, a description in the Dhammacakka Sutta and so forth. And so yeah, to me, this metaphor, an author, Bhante Katakrande Nyanananda, he wrote a book called The Magic of the Mind. And in there, he uses this metaphor of avidya when talking about the dependent co-arising. And you have these links, right? And there's 12 links, and one seems to cause the next, and so forth. And so it can be often understood as kind of a very linear, like a chain of things happening. But he gives this imagery of ignorance being darkness. Particularly the darkness surrounding a stage where a magician is doing his work. And so ignorance is the context in which these other steps, the other activities take place. And it's what actually allows them to take place, because if we were to see clearly, we'd see through the illusion, the illusory magic of this sham artist. So, if sometimes I'll walk the trails, either going back to my kuti or just when I'm outdoors at night, and I'll turn off my headlamp. And especially on nights where it's either a quarter moon or relatively dark, or a new moon, or a night like tonight could be a great example when it's overcast and raining. And trying to walk in the forest where there's lots of trees and rocks, and there's hills and the shapes and so forth. And instead of trying to pay attention to, there's two ways you can go about it. One is kind of interesting, and one is to not concentrate on or focus on the shapes themselves, but like just try to almost unfocus your eyes and try to get a really broad sense of what's going on. And you see that in the darkness there's all kinds of artifacts, I guess you'd call them, like, distortions. There's all kinds of stuff going on in the darkness, and the grays and the different shades and so forth, that are pretty clearly they're not from the light itself. It's more like, what's happening when the eye is going into your eyeball, and what's happening in your nervous system and so forth. But they're it's like the graininess in a television or a bad, low quality camera or something like that. It's kind of similar, as a different character, but it's the same sort of thing. And it's imperfections in the apparatus is what it's from. And you start to see, first of all, that my sight is not perfect. It's not reproducing an exact form of what's external. It's kind of it's doing its best, but it's and it's there it serves a certain purpose, but it's not perfect by any means. But then also, especially when it's kind of this sort of half dark thing going on, you start to see shapes in the darkness. Another metaphor for this could be like seeing shapes in the fog. And your mind, in an effort to make objects out of your sensory experience, you're getting in a lot of essentially kind of chaotic data. It's data that it's not clear, is not a clear shape, it's not a clear form. And so, you're kind of grappling, kind of groping for a a shape, a recognizable form. And because of the nature of, the low light and everything, it's kind of always shifting and changing, and it's unreliable. And so it's this kind of type thing that's kind of going on constantly with our perceptions in general, our perceptions around other people, our perceptions around situations, our perceptions around our future and our past and all these things. So we make sense of things by identifying people and actions and motivations and things, but if we really take a look at them in our own experience, we find that our motivations or our perceptions about things they're so amorphous, or they're changing, they're unreliable in a very fundamental way. And when we get two people together and we start talking about something, or we have an interaction in the kitchen or in the monk's room or whatever it is, you can start to see how these distortions can kind of bump into each other and get all tangled and twisted, and sometimes it's fine, sometimes it's not. But even if you can't identify exactly what's going on, at least not trusting your experience enough to sort of get some space around it, and to sort of not take it so seriously that you blind yourself from other perspectives and other ways of understanding the situation. This kind of goes along with like the sense of blind spots, like the imagery that comes to mind is this on the sides of these these semi trucks, right? They say drivers stay out of this zone, and they have a little diagram of the truck making a turn, and the mirrors will cover a certain swath of the area around the truck, but there's an area which they do not cover, and you don't want to be sort of trapped in there, stuck in that zone, because the driver can't see you because of the mirrors and everything, and the size of his truck. So these are, again, it's like, how do I identify blind spots? And there's all kinds of little tricks and stuff. Friends in the holy life, living in community, is a really good way of doing it. Literally just asking people for advice and for stuff, or sometimes you see other people with the same blind spot, and all of a sudden it sort of dawns on you, whoa, oh, that's what I'm missing, or maybe that's what's going on, and then trying to shift and play around with things. But it isn't, it's not to be made light of in terms of this sense of not knowing what we don't know. Because it's like, for me, it's kind of it's become an interesting problem. Like, okay, there's definitely stuff going on here which, it's like I'm riding, like, in a sense of, like riding along in the stream, but not necessarily seemingly to have a lot of control over it. The other metaphor that comes to mind for this is kind of a cliche little vignette, little story. It goes something like, there's two young fish swimming along, and there's an older fish swimming in the opposite direction. And as he swims by, he addresses the young fish and says, "Good morning, boys. How's the water?" And he keeps on swimming. And the two younger fish swim on for a second. One of them turns to the other and goes, "What the hell is water? What's he talking about?" And this, for most of us, most of the time, and this is our, that the water is our sense of self. Or it's not even a sense of self, it's this constantly shifting and moving form in the dark that, that's a selfing process, right? The Buddha often will call it ahankara mamankara, the I making and the mind making. So this self isn't necessarily a thing, it's something that we do, it's something that we're constantly doing. It's this trying to see the shapes in this shifting and moving dark, or the shapes in the fog, and we get fixated on certain shapes, and that fixation will blind us to other things. And I guess just being aware that that's happening is something that I've been coming to terms with for quite a while now, and coming up with these little tricks and things to start picking out specific areas and specific ways that I'm missing things or distorting things. And quality of attention, or the training, retraining the attention to look for things that you don't normally look for. This is where, like, people have been mentioning cultivating new skills or picking up a craft. It's like, say, with woodwork or, dwelling outdoors or something like that, listening to the birds and trying to understand the ecology on the land. And, I didn't grow up doing any of this kind of type stuff, either sowing or tracking deer or, any of this stuff. And so in order to become skilled at these things, let alone master them, but just to become competent or just to try them out, I have to start noticing details about the cloth, say with sewing, like these stitches that Tankema was talking about. Like, normally, I just look at some piece of manufactured thing that I bought, and it's like, oh, those are the stitches. Yeah, that's what holds it together, right? Okay. And then it's like, wait, no, look closer. You see the spaces in between the stitches? Look for the stitch on the other side. Oh, okay, right. And you have to sort of then connect that, what that looks like with, is the stitch tension too high on top, or is it too low on the bottom, or too high on the bottom and too low on the top? What does that look like? So you can look at a stitch immediately and be able to identify it. Before, a stitch was just a stitch, but now you can look at a stitch and very quickly identify what's wrong with the sewing machine. But having to train your attention in that way, it's not easy. And it takes this trial and error, but it also kind of takes this kind of thinking outside the box, or learning to pay attention to new information or old information in a new way. And that's where taking on these new skills, new responsibilities, these new hobbies, crafts here and there or whatever, and being able to notice details or notice things in a different way. And this ties directly into the practice, because, if we take on faith what the Buddha is talking about, one of these basic assumptions is that we're here doing this samsarati thing, samsarati being like the verb, right? Like this circling, we're like stumbling through life in circles. The reason why we're doing this, we're stuck here, is because we're not using our minds in the best way. We're not thinking long term. We're not acting in ways that are skillful. Okay. So again, it's back to like moha and avijja. Like, there's stuff going on which I'm doing it badly. I'm not doing it skillfully. I'm not playing the instrument well. I'm not using the sewing machine correctly. I'm not using my mind, in a way that a true master would. So I need to take a step back and start to learn new things about my mind. These old habits that I've inherited from my culture, from my parents, from, uncountable rounds of samsara. They're not, some of them are good, some of them are bad, some of them are okay. Which ones are good, which ones are bad? And start to figure out how to make the bad ones good and make the good ones stronger. But it's like it's the same exact skill as sitting down at a sewing machine, or, sitting down at a lathe, or, looking at a deer hoof print and trying to learn new things about this experience. So this ties into this this Pali word that is thrown around a lot. It's sampajanya. Sampajano is kind of the adjective, and there's a few different translations. One about Bhikkhu Bodhi's, I don't know what he's using these days, but an earlier translation I think was clear awareness. It's probably one of my favorite ones, because there's a lot of teachers and traditions and whatever books will use it in certain technical ways, and that's all very useful. But when I looked, I was trying to understand, because this is a word that comes up in the suttas and especially on, sense of mindfulness or meditation and these things. And this word comes up, and it's a very good word to learn. And what is the Buddha actually getting at? So there's kind of two very clear, he never actually defines it as far as I can tell, but he uses it in specific ways sometimes that indicate what it means. And one of them, I think I don't know if he uses, I think he uses the word sampajana in this description, but it's basically like, and maybe it has to do with moha, I forgot. Anyways, this sense of, I think it's like the Tathagata is one who knows, when it's daytime, the Tathagata knows that it's daytime. And when it's nighttime, the Tathagata knows that it's nighttime. You think, well, that's pretty obvious. Yeah, but actually, there was a friend of mine who was very into a specific computer game, and he had been playing it very intently for quite a long time, and I had kind of lost contact with him. We had stopped hanging out mostly because he was playing this computer game very intensely. And so after a few weeks, maybe a month or more since I had seen him, I went to his apartment, knocked on his door, and I think his partner at the time opened it and let me in. And I went to his bedroom and I knocked on it, and he opened up and he had this like 1,000-yard stare. He was like, "Whoa, hey man, what's going on? It's been a long time." I said, "Yeah, man. Great, I'm just swinging by, you want to get something to eat?" And he goes, "I don't know, maybe. What time is it?" I said, "Oh, it's 7 o'clock. He literally asked me, AM or PM? I was like, whoa. PM, man. It's like, but he was like, "Oh no, man, I got this meeting with these people, I got this raid, And it's just like, all right, peace. But it was like, oh wow, there are situations or times when people are really confused about whether or not it's day or night. So, But the other one is also, it's more specific, more interesting. It's more refined as well. It's in, I think, the Mahasunyata Sutta, the discourse on the greater discourse on emptiness. And the sutta is very long and very rich. Has a great frame story as well. But this specific part about clear awareness, it goes something like, when somebody's meditating and they have a mind that is full of lust, they know, quote, "My mind is full of lust." And they are clearly aware of that. When they have a mind that's not full of lust, they know, quote, "My mind is not full of lust." And they have full awareness of that. And it goes through a number of these qualities, but it's basically like, it's basic awareness, like what's happening. The other one is from like the Satipatthana Sutta and a few other places where a bhikkhu who is mindful, it's like mindful walking forward and walking back, when extending his limbs, when wearing his robe, I think something like when eating and defecating, and he knows what he's doing basically. And should be noted that these descriptions in the sutta actually correlate to the monastic training rules. It's maybe something that a lot of lay practitioners may not be able to clearly identify, but there's these rules or these training, training rules at the end of the Patimokkha. There's 75 of them. They're called the Sekhyas, the to be trained in, and they have to do with wearing your robe, walking around. How should we walk in town? Don't swing your limbs everywhere. Don't be yelling across the street. These kind of type things. How to receive food in your bowl, how to eat the food, and even how to urinate and defecate. There's rules, or recommendations on how to do these things respectfully and with composure. And so this little description of Sampajanya is a description of these monastic training rules, and it's kind of like, did you know? It's like situational awareness. Like, do you know what's going on around you? And are you acting appropriately and in a composed and peaceful manner? And so this sense of awareness is intrinsic to that. Knowing what's going on clearly and then responding with wisdom is kind of the essence of it. And so this is why a lot of the monastic training as well is it's really really simple stuff, like people who, get morning chores here. We do a lot of sweeping, and sometimes it doesn't seem like there's that many leaves, but we still sweep. And it's not accidental, actually. It's something that it goes back to the earliest days of our tradition in terms of, the Buddha himself, but also the Thai forest tradition. And, keeping the monastery clean is a practical benefit. But really, it's also about looking for leaves that you miss, looking for leaves that you don't notice that are there. Or, just even simple things like learning how to use a broom efficiently and beautifully. Seeing monks who are well trained, swinging one of these large brooms in a composed and beautiful and efficient way that leaves a swath of clean dirt or gravel behind it. These kind of type refinements, these getting into the body and being aware of your surroundings and being able to skillfully navigate your tool and your raw material and your situation in a way that that's calming and that leads towards greater awareness and hopefully gets us out of our fixations, gets us tuned into our blind spots, and lends clarity. And it's also a lot of this thinking on this, or this kind of approach, came from a question that I had asked Ajahn Pasanno. I think it may have been a massage session, but I asked him, because this sense of, kind of getting your hands dirty. It's like when you sit and meditate, it's like, okay, roll up your sleeves, get my hands dirty, get in there, get those unwholesome qualities, figure out what they are and get them out. I gotta really get in there and, figure out what's going on and fix it. And I don't remember exactly how I phrased it with Ajahn Pasanno, but it was like, I was basically asking him if that's a good attitude to have when you meditate, like you gotta get in there. It was something like going into the shadow and sort of wrestling with your demons kind of type thing. And he said, no, you want clarity. You want to essentially prioritize clarity, because if you go in there looking for problems, you kind of see, it's going to be distortions. You're going to see stuff that isn't there. You're going to project. He used the word projection. It's like you're going to be projecting on your experience. And again, just to point out that when you're trying to understand the mind, remember you were doing it with the mind. So this is where these, as Bhante Nyananda would say, these are the paper tigers that we create, and all of a sudden they're attacking us. So it's very easy to sort of get fooled by these distortions and these sort of self-created projections when we're doing this work. And he said, no, you want to get clarity, and that was really helpful, because it is not only is it kind of prone to more distortions and projections, but also that kind of burden of it's broken, I need to fix it. And on one level that's true. We're stuck in samsara. I have avijja, I have kilesa, I need to get rid of the kilesa. Fair enough. But you can't sort of get in there and root out the problem. If you can't work on the disease if you have it incorrectly diagnosed. If you're asking the wrong questions, the patient comes in with a headache, and you sort of send him to the foot doctor or something, and it's like no. So clearly understanding what is happening around us, in our minds, with our interactions with other people, clearly understanding that, that actually gives us a much better platform, a much better way, a much more reliable way of understanding what we're doing and why we're doing it and what the problems are. And so this clarity of mind comes from a peaceful mind and comes from sila and all these really wonderful qualities. And again, maybe not to underestimate the importance of our mentors, our teachers, and our peers in the holy life, because these are some of the greatest sources of inspiration and also, frustration and confusion in terms of, when we do, have difficulties, interpersonal difficulties and so forth. But everyone we live with in a monastery like this, and there's such an incredible resource for inspiration and ideas about how we can do it better, whatever it is, a skill in the workshop, a tudong, and especially meditation. And the ability for our companions to be a source of information about how we're getting it wrong, and especially a source of encouragement and uplift. So I offer that for your reflection this evening.
Jino.
Okay. It's around 10:23. I didn't really know what time it was when I asked myself that question maybe 15 minutes ago. It's sometimes tough to tell where we are, but maybe that wasn't the right question to ask, too. Never really know where we are when we ask in terms of convention. But if we ask the body, I didn't do Namo Tassa, I'm sorry. Maybe I'll get off to a little better start. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sangham Namasami. I think I'll change my focus a little bit. I gotta restart. But I guess in terms of Dhamma practice, we can get a restart, which is the real blessing. I know myself, I just caught myself either today or yesterday, just for a moment getting a little spun out and thinking something's wrong, there's not peace right now. And seeing I was caught up in slightly unwholesome state of mind, and then just bringing up metta, and then, restart, recheck, refresh. And we're back in a place of safety. So sometimes it's simple. We don't realize how simple, just think metta, metta. Having practiced that, knowing what that feels like, bringing that into the present moment. It's an unbelievably strong force that can dispel confusion,
darkness. Yeah, and it's a direct path to peace. I think the more simple tools we have that are reliable, then the more we strengthen some core tools to deal with the confusing, unsettled moments that arise, we can kind of vanquish them quite easily. Yeah, we shouldn't overestimate we shouldn't think that the practice is actually too difficult. It's really not. Be kind to yourself. Appreciate where you are. It's not too hard to do when you're in the monastery around good people, making merit, working on friendship, appreciating the support we have every day. Perfect place to find yourself. Yeah, it's been raining out now about all day, past couple days, and when I was walking down this morning, I noticed the deer, a couple sets of deer, and they all I perceived them to be very happy. They don't have to, finally, I don't know how they do it, but they get by with barely any water during the hot season, and now they have water. So I was just so happy for them, because it's a little bit less of a burden they have. Lessening our burdens. What is a burden? Why are there burdens? Sometimes they arise on their own, or sometimes we kind of find ourselves doing something that's muddling our experience. So just there, in that moment, you can see that felt experience, something's not right here. And applying one of your tools, maybe letting go, and seeing what happens, trying to get as little as involved as possible. Just maybe some type of a cue, a little plug, add a little, just a slightly different ingredient that might be missing, or your favorite ingredient to help cool down the moment. Because we should enjoy life. Shouldn't bring suffering upon ourselves. And if we are suffering, we should do the best we can immediately to remedy that situation. And kindness, I find, is usually the best option. And often what I've learned in monastic life is kind of unconventional kindness. How can I really be kind to myself right now? What do I really need? Regardless of what I fear about what other people are going to think of me, or how this is going to affect my whole life's path. What about just now? What would be a kind thing, a really nice thing to do? And just applying that, over and over, that kindness. Because we're the only ones who can really fix our situation. And just when you're kind to anything, it's a wholesome intention, and the response is actually what's really interesting. What we can do is have a kind intention, and behind, it can be for all of us, it's a different action, but the intention is roughly the same. We all know how to be kind. And then when we see what the response is in terms of karma, or even if it's in a way of letting go, then what disappears or falls away it's very apparent, and we receive that. And that's ours, that in terms of the moment, that is ours to enjoy. And it's not be all, end all, but it is an aid in just getting by. If we can just get by every day, over and over, be kind to ourselves, be kind to others, do things that we don't have remorse over, then we're really freeing up ourselves, kind of shedding off old clothes. And always coming too from that perception of not knowing too what's going to arise. Thinking, okay, I'll do my best in this situation. Let's see what happens. And being completely open to watching that process unfold. Seeing what the fruits of kindness really are. And how it's just about one of the only and truest solutions that can give rise to happiness and joy. We don't stumble upon joy by torturing ourselves. If I, just make everything really difficult, then I'll be happy. If I just throw a stone at this deer, it's going to be super happy right now. It's just not the way nature works. So watching nature, all these things are so obvious and apparent in nature, but we think, the problem is when we try to outsmart nature and come up with too many of our own ideas and ideals, shortcuts. But maybe this will be a good shortcut. I haven't seen this one before. I wonder what the result will be. But just sticking kind of with the basics. And rain is good. Like peace is good. But we also need to temper that with if it only rained all the time, all year, there would be too much water for the plants. So kind of knowing too when to let go of even the peace, to let go of our practice, engage in some things like service, helping out others, using that energy that we have and that clarity to lend a hand, and then, providing some sun. And then when it's time when we've had enough sun, had enough of that, we can go back, have things be well-rounded, more sustainable. Yeah, so appreciate everyone's patience here, everyone listening to everyone's words, and I hope they're very fruitful and are bringing up sources of well-being within your experience right now. Okay, thank you.
Dhammavaro.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammāṃ Sanghaṃ namasami. I think I was a novice, and I remember asking Lumpā, Lumpā, is there anything that you would recommend me trying out or practicing? One word answer: metta. And it's been really rich, just going from there and seeing where it's brought me today. I feel like it's been a nice mantra, asking myself, what does it actually mean right now? What does having metta in this moment actually, what is the experience? The Buddha talks about you can be dwelling in this state all the time. Okay, so what does metta look like at 4 a.m? What does metta look like in the middle of the day? What does metta look like when someone tells me something I don't want to hear at all? What does metta look like when everything's going okay? What does it actually mean, just in general? And I think keeping the intention for myself, too, that this is where I want to take my practice. This is possible, and to develop metta to its fullest extent. So what does it look like for you right now? I've noticed since I've started doing this more that there's kind of this dualistic nature that comes up, and hearing other teachings, it's been really inspiring and helpful to pair it with metta. That there's this concept of doing things and letting go. So maybe if I apply this to metta, it feels almost synonymous with death, like I can just go back to that quality of the heart that says, it's okay. It's okay. You can just put all of this down. Whatever happened, that you did, that anyone did, it's okay. This is a moment when you can put all that down. Then I've also explored through acts of body and speech. Well, yeah, that's metta too, isn't it? Metta can be in there. What is it actually? How does that get played out? How is it embodied through body, speech, and mind? And so noticing doing things, I think it's been actually really easy to see that when I'm not doing it through body and speech, what it feels like. What it feels like when you're just kind of giving that, just, okay, I'm going to tell someone what they want to hear, or this is just going to be an automatic answer. Something in the mind's kind of checked out. You kind of feel this distance. Like whatever's happening right now, like there's this kind of like, I know this person wants to talk to me, but I'm not really here. I'm not here with it. And almost noticing that there's this, that's where the barrier, almost kind of like there's something keeping us from the experience of it. And, just noticing it. Yeah, my heart's not into this right now. I'm actually not, I'm talking with this person, but am I really, what's the depth of this? Am I really there with it? Yeah, and just so noticing when it's not there. The Buddha talks in ways of how metta can take us to nibbana. So how can I apply that concept of kindness, goodwill, openness, acceptance, and use this as a vehicle to get where I ultimately want to go? So maybe these are some helpful questions that I found quite beneficial. What do I want to develop? What do I want to do with my time? How far can I take this? And trust me, you can do it. If I can do it, not that I've done it, but yeah, it's just so much better. We can do it. Just stay with that. We can do this. I can do this. This is possible. So what do I really want? Okay, let's make it happen. I'll leave that for your consideration.
Samanera Tejasaro.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. Found myself getting pretty tired recently, like past 30 minutes. It wasn't like a painful kind of sleepiness. It was more out of just being really relaxed. And I think it has something to do with the rain. And a memory from my childhood back in Houston when it rains a lot in the summertime. And I think it was morning time and my mom gave me a bowl of toast with a boiled egg. And it was raining outside and I was just watching the rain. And so there's definitely a sense of safety and ease right now. And I'm sure probably, or hopefully most of you have a good memory of being sheltered in the rain. It wasn't too long ago, maybe a couple hours, I was actually going through some kind of emotional turmoil. And for some reason that's passed. And it seemed really complicated a couple hours ago, and now it's pretty simple. I'm just inside, and it's raining, and I'm not wet. And I think back on that memory too is my mom, my caregiver, giving me food and giving me shelter and clothes and took care of me when I was sick all the time. And I think about now being here, and my mom's not here, but I'm getting all of those needs met in just amazing ways. Ways I take for granted quite a bit. But the structure and the container here for reflection allows me to think about all that's been given to me. And it was a bit sad at the same time, like whenever I have these moments of gratitude for the lay supporters, fellow monastics, everybody supporting me, being here, and each other. Some sadness comes about because I realize my parents and my extended family were there for me too, and didn't really have a whole lot of gratitude for them at the time. Of course, now I do. As I've gotten older, further away from them. And that's okay. I can feel sad and grateful at the same time. I think that's a mature way to hold emotions. Back to the first thing I said, I am tired, so I do want to keep it short, and I thank everybody for providing for me and everyone else here and each other, all that we need to live a simple life, and yeah, that's it. Good night.
Jotimanto.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So, some time ago, a simile spontaneously occurred to me, and I thought I would use that as the basis for this talk. And that simile is that a blade is strengthened and stabilized by its tang, and yet that tang is a part of that very same blade. And in just the same way, the Brahma Viharas are strengthened and stabilized by equanimity, and yet that equanimity is a part of those very same Brahma Viharas. And this is something I've been contemplating recently, and I found it to be very helpful. There's a sutta where the Buddha, he describes the Brahma Viharas in a unique way. He says that all four of them should be developed with directed thought and evaluation, with no directed thought and some evaluation, with no directed thought and no evaluation, with rapture, without rapture, accompanied by pleasure, endowed with equanimity. And so there's a wide range of applications for these four divine abidings: goodwill, compassion, appreciation, equanimity. But I thought I'd focus on this last factor, talk a bit about goodwill endowed with equanimity, compassion endowed with equanimity, appreciation endowed with equanimity, and equanimity endowed with equanimity. When we work with states like goodwill, it can sometimes be a bit confusing because we might recite certain phrases like, may you be happy, may you be well, all these things, but it's not always clear what that means. One way of understanding equanimity is this reflection on karma. I am the owner of my actions, heir to my actions, born of my actions, related to my actions, abide supported by my actions. Whatever actions I shall do, for good or for ill, of that I will be the heir. And I find it useful to apply this reflection as a basis for supporting the Brahma Viharas. So with goodwill, for example, we might find that we can have goodwill for people we like or have been good to us, our parents, our friends, our heroes, etc., our pets. But then we find that we struggle to bring these things up for others, people that we're indifferent to or that don't like, or that we don't like, or who have harmed us in some way. And yet we're told that it's possible. And I think it's important to note that what it really means to wish happiness for someone is for them to cultivate goodness. And so when we couch our goodwill in equanimity in this way, we realize that when people do, say, unsavory things, we realize that that's not actually for their well-being. And so real goodwill is about bringing up this recollection that in order for beings to find true happiness, they have to do the wholesome. And so if we want different ways of viewing this practice of metta, instead of saying things like, may they be happy, may they be well, we could just as easily couch this recollection in terms like, may they be inspiring, may they be selfless, may they be compassionate, may they be wise, may they be energetic, may they be considerate, May they be giving. May they be virtuous. And when you start to bring up these perceptions of other beings, this practice of metta can become much more palatable. We do this recollection in our chanting sometimes, the reflection on universal well-being, which is, on the surface, it sounds like a general wish for all beings to be well. But it's interesting how the chant ends. When they act upon intention, all beings are the owners of their actions. Heir to their actions, abide supported by their actions. Whatever actions they do, for good or for ill, of that they will be the heir. So it has this basis of equanimity through the reflection on karma. I don't think that's an accident, because wholesome qualities are inherently blameless. And so when we can open up to the potentials that others have for goodness, we realize that it doesn't actually make a lot of sense to wish any harm on them. And so we can use equanimity in this way to stabilize our goodwill. And this recollection can also be used for compassion. We realize that beings ultimately suffer due to bad karma that they've made, bad actions that they've done, unwise actions that they've done, selfish actions that they've done. And we recognize that it doesn't have to be that way. And so we recognize that when beings are doing unskillful things in the present, this really does open up a space for compassion, because we see that they have the potential to do so much more than that. We don't want to see them harmed in that way. Or we can apply this kind of reasoning to ourselves. We remember times that we regret and feel remorse over. Things that we did that were shameful or embarrassing or unwholesome, and realizing that we brought suffering on ourselves because of unwholesome qualities that we had. So there's an imperative associated with it, this contemplation on action, that we have the ability to do the good and not do the bad, and we should do the good and not do the bad. And that's true of other beings as well. And this can be especially hard with people that we care about when we're, say, practicing compassion, and we realize that, we see ways that the people that we care about are not acting for their true happiness, even though that's ultimately what they want. And that's what we want for them. And there's a certain kind of solace that comes from contemplating karma in this way. And that can be a heart-opening experience. Or there's appreciation. When we say recollect someone's good qualities, if we relate to that with ignorance, then states like jealousy or insecurity can come up. But when we reflect on karma, we realize that actually everything is the way that it's supposed to be, because whatever fortune they're experiencing, whether they have wealth or health, beauty, talent, good relationships, good qualities in general, good life circumstances, this is all the result of good things that they did in the past. And so they earned that fair and square by cultivating qualities that are inherently blameless. And so this can dispel some of the darkness and the wrong view that gives rise to these unwholesome states, such as jealousy and insecurity and so forth. And we can apply this reflection on karma to ourselves as well when cultivating appreciation, mudita, realizing that whatever fortune we've acquired, we also earned that fair and square. And that's not something to be ashamed of. And so we can use equanimity in this way to brighten the mind with these states: metta, karuna, mudita, goodwill, compassion, appreciation. And that can be a form of equanimity accompanied by rapture. But then there's also equanimity endowed with equanimity. And this is important because part of what equanimity realizes is that the world that we live in is imperfect. And even though beings should do the good and not do the bad, and we should do the good and not do the bad, sometimes this happens anyways. And there's not necessarily going to be any tidy resolution to this fact. And so we need a way to stabilize ourselves in a world that is inherently changing, unsatisfying, imperfect. We need to be okay in that world. This is part of what makes equanimity into an awakening factor. So with these 7 factors for awakening, they're listed as, these are basically the qualities that one needs to develop in order to attain the goal. These qualities are mindfulness, investigation of dhammas or qualities, energy, rapture, tranquility, concentration, and then the last, equanimity. And so the reason we need equanimity as an awakening factor is because it gives the mind its gyroscopic quality as it moves through this independable world. And with states like, or practices like goodwill, compassion, mudita, appreciation, there can be a tendency to want to try and force a change on the aspects about the world that we don't like. If I just send enough metta to this person, they'll become the person that I want them to be. They won't be the person I don't want them to be. They'll stop doing the things I don't like. This tendency to want to force a change in a world that we find uncomfortable. Whereas this equanimity endowed with equanimity has a certain contentedness to it. As I mentioned before, it's a recollection on action, and so it carries an imperative with it. But at the same time, there's also a recollection that we can only do so much in terms of things like our impact on the world, our impact on conditions. And so again, there's a certain solace that comes with, at the proper time, knowing how to be okay with things as they are. A few years ago, we had a commencement event that lasted over the course of many days for this new cloister area and all of the infrastructure that was recently built. And we had many highly esteemed monks come visit our monastery during that time and stay for various periods. And I had the good fortune to have some brief interactions with Luangpur Liam, who, for those who don't know, is widely renowned for his equanimity. And I feel like I got to learn a bit about equanimity through interacting with him. And one event that stands out in my mind as being a real teaching experience was we were basically training in preparation for his visit on how to wash his hands after the meal. It's an act of service. And in my Anagarika zeal, I decided that I wanted to be the first one to wash Luangpur Liam's hands. And so the way that I made that happen was I decided that I would take a pinch of rice for my meal so that I could be the first one to finish. And so I did this. I finished my meal first and sort of waited. Just kind of waited until it looked like the meal was wrapping up. And I pushed my bowl forward, went into the monk's room, grabbed the tray for washing his hands, sat down in the middle of the hall, waiting for him to finish his meal. And so at this time, there was this anticipation mounting. What am I going to learn from interacting with the Arahant? And I could feel myself expecting some sort of impact, being blasted by his metta, or being crushed by his tranquility, or being eviscerated by his wisdom, expecting to experience some kind of forceful interaction. And I remember when the time came to actually wash his hands, I started pouring the water on his hands, and he was just sort of rubbing them very calmly, looking down. And what stood out to me was the distinct lack of impingement or impact or sense impression. You could say he wasn't trying to impress me, but there was this profound sense of stillness where I didn't feel like anything was being impressed upon me. There was no forceful impact of any kind, but just this peaceful presence. And that was when it occurred to me that equanimity is something gentle. It's not trying to force a change on conditions. It has a quality of gentleness, contentment, understanding. And we use this to straighten out our right view. And that right view brings a quality of wisdom to these attitudes of goodwill and compassion and appreciation and equanimity. And so I would like to offer this reflection and this encouragement to hold these attitudes in a skillful way and find peace and contentment and comfort and happiness in a world that is otherwise.
Sampanno is the final.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Well, it's almost midnight. We've all been sitting for a long time. Appreciate everybody's attention and patience. There's been a lot of really wonderful talks, and people have been very generous with sharing so much good Dhamma. So I really appreciated it. Last year, I prepared in my head what I was going to say. I think I actually practiced. So I gave a totally candid talk last year, and this year I haven't even really thought about at all what I was going to say.
But I did think about this one sutta that I really like. We chant it often, and so maybe I'll just say a verse or two from there. It's the Mangala Sutta, the sutta on the highest blessings, and we chant it in Pali when we do the paritas, and it's quite beautiful, and just in Pali. But we also do it in English as a closing reflection, the discourse on the highest blessings, and it's the Buddha teaching a deva, heavenly being, about what are the highest blessings in life. And one that was coming to mind that I think of after we spend this Vassa period together, everybody practicing together and so forth, is living in places of suitable kinds with the fruits of past good deeds and guided by the rightful way. These are the highest blessings. So definitely being in a monastery around good people, people that are living based on the Dhamma and living virtuously, is definitely living in a suitable place. There's a lot of places where it's quite hard to practice. It's quite hard to live virtuously based on our surroundings. And Ajahn Jotimanto talked about karma and how the blessings we're experiencing now are based on the good that we've done in the past, and how that's definitely something to rejoice in. And the second part of this line, or the finishing part, is guided by the rightful way. I think in Pali it's the word atta, which is the word for goal, or aim, or the goal of practice, which we could say is nibbana. We can talk about it in different ways, but aiming correctly, having a correct aim in life, and orienting ourselves towards that is very important. So many people don't have a worthy aim in life and don't see meaning and purpose, and consequently have very difficult and confused and challenging lives because of that. So if we have faith in the Buddha's teaching and keep the goal and the aim in mind, and constantly correct our course and aim at the highest good, it's truly a blessing, and that's what we're all trying to do here. And I've just been very impressed by hearing everybody's talks, and appreciated all of them. So I think I'll leave it at that and wish everybody the best in their practice.
Echo what Tan Sampanno said. Thank you to everybody. All of the talks without exception. Very wonderful to hear, wonderful to listen to. Very helpful. I hope this tradition never dies out. At Wat Pah Pong, when I spent Vassa there, they had 62 monks, and they had to do the all-night talks over 2 all-nights in a row. So maybe we'll have to do that eventually.